So in 5 seconds, we will be live everywhere.
We are live now.
Good morning. It's my honor and privilege to welcome you to the worldwide launch of a movement called the E5 movement. We are here together to talk about leadership. And let me introduce our panelists. We have Mr. S. Raghunath, who's the chairperson for Center for Corporate Governance at IIM Bangalore, which is India's top business schools. Professor Raghunath, welcome to the launch of the E5 movement, the global launch of the E5 movement. Your being here brings the academician and the consultants perspective. You work with CEOs on leadership and corporate governance. We also have Mr. Ken Honda for people who are book aficionados and follow authors in books. Mr. Ken Honda doesn't really need an introduction. He's a best-selling author. He's based in Japan. He was born in Kobe and he's sold more than 8 million books. His last book, which I read, Happy Money, I would recommend that you read that. Welcome, Mr. Ken Honda. We also have Mr. Roopen Roy, who's the founder and CEO of Sumantrana Consulting. Sumantrana in Bengali means good advice. So in his previous stints as the chairman of the top 2 consulting firms in the world in India, he's worked with many CEOs and guided them on leadership. And the E5 movement is about leadership. But last and not the least, we have Mr. Paul Dupuis, who's the author of the E5 movement. Paul, welcome to the global launch of the E5 movement. We will today talk about leadership, and it's an honor and privilege to have you as part of this global launch. And let me start by asking, the E5 movement is about leadership. And, you know, the book will be launched and we will all get to read it. But E5 stands for 5 E's. And, you know, tell us, Paul, how did you think of the book first? How did this idea come to you? What was the genesis? What was the backstory behind it? If you can take us through that, and then I'll bring Roopen and Professor Raghunath and Ken into it.
Thank you, Annurag. I'd be happy to. And thank you, everyone, for joining here today. Of course, our panelists, and also we have friends, family, colleagues, I mean, from Canada to the US, all through Europe. There are friends in Japan also on this call, so thank you. And of course, India is well represented in the call today. The E5 movement, Annurag, was really born through 30 years of experience leading and following across borders. You know, I left for Japan in 1990. In fact, it's my 30th anniversary coming up in September 5th, when I left Canada with a backpack. First time out of Canada, first time on an airplane, and I landed in Osaka, Japan. So actually Ken Honda's neighborhood just down the road. And that was back in the day, pre-internet and so on. And I had a plan to stay for 6 months, and I fell in love with Japan. I stayed in Japan, in and out, off and on, for about 25 years. I've lived in Singapore and worked in pretty well every country in Asia. And now I'm based here in India, in Bangalore now for just over 3 years. The book itself was born from experience, but it was also partly due to people like Ken Honda and other friends who encouraged me to put my thoughts down on paper. And, you know, the idea that we all lead interesting lives in our own way, and it's important to share that. And that's about impact and, of course, legacy. So the book was born from real experiences. And when you read the E5 movement, I hope that you'll see that the book is not theoretical. I've tried hard to make it real, practical, with lots of personal stories, but also observations
anecdotal and experiential.
Very much, very much. And real experiences. Certainly Japan plays heavy into my experiences in Japan and Japanese culture, Japanese leadership, but also my experiences in India and across the Asia Pacific region, and also Europe play into the book as well. So it was born from experience. The pen hit the paper. Again, I'll go back and say thanks to Ken Honda, who through our dinners, Ken, in Tokyo every year, you said to me, Paul, you got to write a book. And in fact, I want to share with you all that Ken also gave me this. And Ken has these amazing, these beautiful pens that he gives out. And Ken, I've got the one you gave me the first time we met. And in Japanese, it basically says, believe in life. Jinsei o shinai shio, right? So believe in life. And I think the key word for me was believe. And at Ken's encouragement, he believed. that I should write a book, and here we are. And what a journey it's been to get to today.
Mr. Dupuis, what do the 5 E's stand for? Can you tell our readers the E5 movement? What are those 5 E's?
Sure. The first one is envision. And simply put, envision is where everything begins. And the exceptional leaders among us are not motivated by the what or the how. They're motivated by the why. It's about greater purpose. And as leaders, we spend a lot of time focusing on the outcomes, the what, and then we dig into the tactics, the how. But we often forget about the why. And the game-changing leaders over history, whether it's in business, sports, arts, religion, and beyond, were motivated and driven, and they built followership, they built movements through the why. So the envision, that's where it all begins. A compelling vision that touches the hearts and the minds. The second one is express. And this is really important. And I talk about this in the book, how the most exceptional leaders were very good at bringing their vision to the people and to ignite that fire, which then results in a movement. And how we express is very important. It's one thing to have a compelling vision, but it's very important to bring it in a way that's digestible, that people can really feel it, and it becomes part of them. The third one is excite. Now, at one point, the objective is to get people excited about your vision. In other words, you want them to stand up and take action. So it is a call to action. That moment of excite, the third E, this is the moment of truth. It's really where breakthrough starts to happen. That's where the momentum really starts to pick up and the wheels are moving. And you can see as a leader that the potential of your vision coming to life is there. The fourth one is enable. And this is crucial because this is where the leader switches roles and becomes the enabler of the team to bring that vision to life, giving them the tools, the knowledge, the support, the push, the pull, everything that's required, of course, to ensure that they can be successful. So leader as enabler is a really crucial step in the evolution of the game-changing leader. The final one is execute. And of course, we all know as leaders, at the end of the day, having a vision, if it's not executed, is simply a daydream. We need to take that vision and make it real. And execution is kind of the proof in the pudding, bringing that vision to life. And it's not done by the leader. It's done through creating a movement, by creating people heading in the same direction towards a North Star, a greater purpose that everyone lives and breathes. So those are the 5 E's. And in the book, I talk about each of them in depth, what they mean. There's lots of ideas on how to develop those skills around the E's, and also some of my own personal experiences and some observations around leaders who were pretty good at some of the E's.
Thank you. And Ms. Dupuis, why do you call it the E5 movement? Why do you think it can become a movement?
Well, Annurag, it's a great question. I'm an avid reader. I mean, my bookshelf is full of books on leadership. I'm a passionate student of leadership, read about it all the time, study. And I think ever since I was a kid, playing ice hockey in Canada and just, being a follower is also being a captain of the team. And I've just always been really interested in, and I think in recent years, what I've realized that a lot of what's written about leadership has been written by people who have studied leadership. And that's certainly not a criticism. It's important. And there's some really good stuff out there written on leadership by people who study leadership. But what I felt was I needed to write something from a leader's perspective, someone who has led and is leading.
From a doer's perspective.
Yeah. And so the book is really focused on personal experiences, discoveries. Again, I'd say successes, and I won't say failures, because as long as you get back up, you haven't failed, right? So learnings, and that's really, in the book, that's really the core message, is that everyone has the potential to be a game-changing leader. We all have that leadership ability and fire within us. And I don't believe anyone is a born leader. I think it's a skill, it's a muscle, it can be developed, but it takes a lot of work. And the E5 is a formula of sorts that can help move from good to great leader.
Thank you for that peek into why you wrote the book, what it was born out of, and why you call it the E5 movement. At this point, Professor S. Raghunath, you heard Mr. Dupuis talking about the genesis of the book, and he explained what the 5 E's are. In context of leadership, I would like you to focus on one of the E's and tell us why it is so relevant in these post-COVID times.
Exactly. So I think the thing about leadership, as we all know, all of us have gone through this. A leader, first of all, has a very high conviction. But then he also needs a very high connection. So there are two parts to what happens. And in these trying times, when uncertainty is very high, and risk to one's own physical existence is always something that looms large in the background in one's thinking and feeling. This 5E concept, especially the piece relating to excite and enable, in my view, are critical contributions of this book. Because in today's time, excitement is actually the opposite of fear and a feeling of bewilderment. And the ability to translate a blueprint through the kind of biases and the beliefs that people in the organization might have. So when we say a leader, we also assume there are followers, right? To be able to be sensitive to the biases, to the theories, to the perceptions of followers, and to go through that maze and excite them, and also enable them, because enablement is always, as Mr. Paul rightly says, is about creating the kind of resources and tools which are very contextual and very realistic, very connected to ground realities. And I think that's a great inspiration in terms of this entire framework.
Thank you. Mr. Roopen Roy, throughout your career of 40 years, and now as an advisor to institutions, individuals, brands, you work on leadership with CEOs. Mr. Dupuis just explained this 5 E's. I would like you to take up one of the E's and explain why leadership is even more important in these new abnormal times. You'll have to unmute yourself, Mr. Roy. You'll have to unmute yourself. Mr. Roy, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
No, there are 2 E's that I would like to focus on, but as you have said, I would focus on the first one, envision. You know, we are now, the leaders are now like captains in very, very choppy waters, in uncertainty. They do not know what is going to happen tomorrow. So this is not a time when you can do a strategy for a grand voyage. You have to now, as Lou Gerstner had once said, you have to seal the leaks in the ship before you plan the grand voyage. Now, right now, when you are envisioning your future, you have to take into account how you should innovate to succeed and stay afloat. And in this, you will see that many of the CEOs are under great pressure to conserve cash, cut costs, but they cannot forget that they must do so with compassion. Because if they behave in a fashion that they are cutting costs, reducing staff, and not behaving in a manner which Gandhiji said, a servant leader. A leader is not just somebody who leads from the front, he is also serving the team. So I think it is very important in trying to envision the future. As a ship, as a captain of a ship in choppy waters, you should instill confidence, show that you are calm, and you are doing things in a manner that is going to help the company steer these choppy waters in a confident manner. So I would say the very difficult part for leaders now is to do the envisioning part. And
Thank you, Mr. Roy, for those inputs, that leaders are in choppy waters, the vision, the fact that you can see the shore and tell your colleagues that, yes, we can reach the shore, is what the leader needs to do. So the envision, the E from the E5 movement becomes relevant. Mr. Honda, you've known Mr. Dupuis for a long time. As he said, you inspired him to write the book. You're a best-selling author, 8 million and books and counting. And, I've not known you the moment Mr. Dupuis said that you are going to be at the launch. I was super excited. I look up to authors more than I look up to anybody else. So tell us, you interacted with Mr. Dupuis over these years. and he's written this E5 movement. Which of the E's is very applicable to Mr. Dupuis, or all the 5 E's are applicable to him?
Thank you. First of all, I want to congratulate Mr. Paul Dupuis. Congratulations on the beautiful launch of the book. And
thank you, Ken. Thank you.
I'm so proud of you. I've asked so many people that I think you should write a book, but not many people listen to me. And you're one of the few people who take my words seriously and just run with it. And I was so proud to see the galley of the book, and it's so well written. And also, I am so honored to be part of this panel because I have had a huge respect for India. I was born in Kobe, and where there's a Indian town. It's in the Indian community in our town, and I've always had a fun memory with my family members. We had this tradition of visiting one of the Indian restaurants every month. So it's been part of my childhood memory, fun memories. And still I love to go to Indian food in Tokyo too. So talk about leadership. I think it's so appropriate for somebody like Mr. Paul Dupuis to write a book on leadership. And since he is on the top of how many people you have in your company? 60,000, something like that?
60,000 in India, yeah.
60,000 people. And when we think of leadership in Japan, we try to kind of feel each other. So the leader has to feel each other, and then all the participants of the group, and then decide. Whereas probably Western leadership, the smart leaders, sometimes not so smart leaders, they have to make the decision, and then others will follow. So you're in just the perfect position to be able to write a book on leadership after learning from Asian leadership and also European, American, and now India. So you've covered it all. So I'm so excited that your idea are going to be seen in the world. And leadership is such a fascinating topic. I have read so many books, and I think I've known so many authors, but I think not many people have that, credentials as you.
Credential and experience.
Yes, from your experiences. So I'm so happy that this book is out, and I just want to know more about E5 with everybody and the viewers and also the panelists. So congrats again.
Thank you.
For our viewers, there are people who are worked with Paul. They are all logged on from everywhere in the world. There's Mr. Raymond Tate, who's congratulating Mr. Dupuis on his book. He's logged in from Australia. For people who are book aficionados, people like me, Mr. Roy, I've blamed everything that I know or I don't know on books and the business school I went to. But me and Paul, when we meet, we exchange books every time we move. We are, when he said Ken Honda, I was like, really, he's joining. So, I'm very excited to read Paul's book, and hopefully in the next few days, I'll be able to complete it. Paul, coming back to you, there is a pre-COVID times and there is a post-COVID times. And the old rules of leadership and the E5 rules of leadership will stay relevant pre-corona and post-corona. Tell us which of the E's is most relevant in post-corona times.
Great question, Annurag. And one of the things I talk about in the book is that effective leadership, exceptional leadership, inspiring leadership, game-changing leadership is timeless, borderless, universal. In other words, pre-corona, post-corona, the main tenets of what makes exceptional leadership does not change. And Ken said it really well, and I think you're right, Ken. You just actually reminded me that my leadership style is quite rooted in taking the pulse of our people to know how they feel. In fact, we even have, and I talk about in the book, about something called pulse check meetings, where you actually, and there's a wonderful phrase in Japanese, which says kuki o yomu, which means read the air, right? It's not what's said, it's what's not said. It's the feeling in the room. And that's something that I've learned in Japan and I've brought with me. So frankly, I think all of the E's are relevant, both pre and post-COVID, but absolutely going back to envision what Roopen said, I believe, and I've seen it with leaders around me, my own leaders, and also leaders that I see that I support and work with in India and beyond. Crisis is a time where we really see what leaders are made of. Not in sunny skies. We see what leaders are made of when the water is choppy and the rain is falling. We really sort of show ourselves and what we're capable of. And the leaders who are really, let's say, doing well through the crisis, in other words, they're holding firm with conviction, as you've said, and commitment and confidence. These are the leaders that have grabbed on to their greater purpose. They focused on the why, and the why becomes the main flag that's being waved, rather than the what, rather than the how, rather than the outcome. And so I think right now, the vision is the most important element for any leader, particularly leadership in crisis. Now, at the same time, that vision needs to carry on beyond the crisis, because we all know, and I think all of us on this call, we've all experienced many crises in our life, world crisis, whether it was 9/11, the dot-com, HN1, SARS, the GFC. In Japan, I've been through 2 big earthquakes in 1995 in Kobe, and then also the one in 2011, the tsunami, the nuclear meltdown, and now we have COVID. One common denominator, one common theme of crisis is that eventually the crisis ends. Every crisis eventually will come to an end, and then there will be a world after the crisis. So it's very important now for leaders to have that ability to take their vision and take it into the day after tomorrow, to peek around the corner and lead their teams around the corner to prepare them. It's not about pouring sugar on the story. I mean, it's very important that we're honest. And I think and I talk about this in the book, leaders need to be very human, need to be transparent. If the waters are choppy, it's okay to admit it. If there's ambiguity and fog in our way, it's okay to admit that to the team. But it's also important to show confidence that the leader has the wheel, that we are continuing to head towards the North Star, that we have a greater purpose, and the greater purpose is more powerful than any crisis.
And Paul, Sanjay Shetty is asking, it was going to be my question to frame a little differently. What was the most difficult thing about writing this book?
The answer to that question is writing the book. And I'll go back to Ken's advice. I mean, he gave me the pen, which is quite appropriate, put the pen on the paper. I think starting is the hardest part, but it's interesting. Anything that's been rewarding has also been extremely challenging to start. At 1990, getting on that plane and leaving my very safe, comfortable world of Windsor, Ontario, and going off to Osaka, Japan, where I knew no one and I didn't speak a word of Japanese. Getting on the plane was the toughest part. Once I got on the plane, everything just sort of happened. And that's the beauty of, making that first step. With the book, though, if I could get a little bit specific on how it came about, this was also a series of discoveries. And as I learned from other authors, that everyone does it a different way. Everyone has their own style, and you come up with what works for you. So I committed that I would write the book January. I started January 2019. And I committed 2 hours every Saturday morning out on my balcony here in Bangalore with a cup of coffee and my laptop in hand and my ideas in my head. So here's what happened. The book in my head, as I started to type, I think I pushed delete backspace more than I actually was able to type something. I kept erasing what I had written. And it would have been like the old days when we were using the typewriter and pulling the paper out and throwing it on the ground. I was doing that. And after 2 hours, I had a blank page. And I thought, wow, this is not going to be as easy as I thought. So I experimented. I even Googled, I did a search, how to write a book. And there's amazing information out there. But there's so much that, again, you get lost, right? So I was getting a little bit, a little bit discouraged because, I was convinced I needed to write the book, but I didn't know how. And then I came up with an idea. And what I did was this. I took my iPhone. I thought, I can talk about the E5 because I've been talking about it for years with my leaders. Took my phone, I activated voice memo, and I sat on my balcony with my coffee and I talked about the E5. And I recorded over 100 voice memos on my phone. Then I went back and I wrote the book based on the voice memos. So that's how the book came to be. I started in January, 2 hours every Saturday morning, fueled by lots of coffee. And I finished the first complete draft in late September.
Yeah, so that's about 9-10 months. And it went into production in December, right?
Yeah, And slowed down a bit because of COVID, of course, but hey, we're here today on June 11th. So.
I want to say to the viewers who logged on from all the parts of the world, and lots of congratulatory messages coming in. Sachin Chaudhary saying, great to see Paul and Ken together, watching from Tokyo, proud of you, Paul. Sachin Chaudhary.
Thanks,
so I want to say that, when you help yourself, God helps you. There is an element of serendipity. I just want to thank our partners, LID Publishing, Businessworld Books, BW Books, and LID Publishing have come together to produce this book. And it's world-class in its production and its content. And hopefully we will enrich your life in a way that you can implement the E5 movement. Coming to Ken, you heard Paul saying what he said, right?
Yes.
Now there are lots of people who want to write a book. And, Mr. Dupuis' first book, and hopefully it'll be a bestseller. But you've been a serial bestseller, right? I've never met you. I'm meeting you today. But I've known about you because of your books. Tell me, is there a playbook to write a book? Is there a playbook to write a book?
I've told people over the years, everybody at least has a book in his or her heart. Because if you have lived more than 10 or 15 years, you have life experiences, and especially all the people from the panel, and also the people viewing this this discussion. I'm sure everybody has a very unique experience in its own style. So at least you can write a book. And then I think the trouble that most of the would-be writers face is that they're so excited about writing something, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee that is a content that everybody wants to read. So you really have to come up with the idea, okay, this is what I want to write. At the same time, that has to be wanted by readers, at least 10,000 people. If 10,000 people are willing to know what you're going to write and pay you, there won't be a book. But if you can generate an interest that in more than 10,000 people, you can become a writer. So get excited about what you want to say, and also get 10,000 people excited about what you're going to say. And then you have yourself one book. And probably for Mr. Dupuis, hundreds of thousands and maybe millions of people for the
And I also want to say to all the viewers that the three gentlemen that are part of the global launch are personally known to Mr. Dupuis. So this is not just getting any three CEOs, or authors. It's about people who know Mr. Dupuis and in some way know that there is a sync in what he's saying in his book and what he's done in his professional and personal life. Mr. Honda, I'm going to write a book this year. I've been talking about it for 6 years. It's called 8 Days a Week. But
wow.
But my 3 rules for writing a book, and I'm not a best-selling author, so I'm not even an author, so I don't even qualify. First, be authentic. In Paul's case, it's a book that is authentic. Second is get started, as Paul said. And third is all of us have a support system, community that loves it. Bounce it off, involve them in the creation of the book. I think and last is get a professional publisher involved. I think involving BW Books and importantly LID, the quality of the book is very global, and you have to be authentic, and some ideas need to be looked at from the prism of an individual, a leader, so that uniqueness comes out. I mean, there are books and books on leadership, but this is Mr. Paul Dupuis' experience of 30 years of being a practitioner, which is poured into the E5 moment. So it is this unique take which people who have worked with him, people who may want a fresh perspective, need it. Because a lot of criticism of new books on any domain is that it's old wine in new bottles, so to say, right? Old sake in a new, pouring pan, whatever you want to say. So I want to come back to Mr. Roy. Mr. Roy, you heard Mr. Honda, you heard Mr. Dupuis. Tell us, you talk about how vision is very important, envision, the E. Tell us, which is the other E that will be even more relevant post-COVID? As I said, we have the AC and the BC, after COVID, before COVID.
I think what is going to be very important is express. You see, you have to communicate fully, transparently, and clearly whatever your vision is to your team. Because at this point in time, everybody is confused. So you may be, for example, now we are doing this video conference because we have now adapted ourselves to the digital platforms to communicate. So it is important in times of crisis for the leader to very transparently and fully communicate. And I think Paul has written this book. What is important is that you can write theories in books, but the war stories are what the readers are looking for. Because if you have had life experiences which give you the credential and ability, if you've been in the trenches, then people want to hear you because they want to understand and learn from those experiences so that they can solve their own problems.
Yeah, so and if I can do it, you can do it. That's the guy. This is how I did it, and this is how you can do it. Coming to Professor Raghunath. Professor Raghunath, we started with you. Now at IIM Bangalore, you work with students. You work with companies and their CEOs. What are you hearing from CEOs that makes the E5 movement even more relevant? When you talk to CEOs, which is your sphere of influence, what are you hearing from CEOs that makes the E5 movement even more relevant in today's time?
Yeah, so today's time, as all of us recognize, is a time of turbulence, right? And there is this uncertainty of change. So two things are bothering everybody. So therefore, the CEO turns into the chief enthusiasm officer, not the chief executive officer. He's got to keep the energy flowing. He is that battery pack which goes with a cell phone, right? So, everybody is running low because they are trying to manage so many things in their mind and in their hearts. And they are then located in a geography and in a place where there is a complete mix of what is personal and what is professional. So the CEO is somebody who watches the environment, has a team which keeps him informed on a day-to-day basis, is able to communicate a degree of enthusiasm about what is going to change and how we can be the change makers and how can we adapt. So I think the primary element in terms of what the CEO does today is to actually build resilience and the ability to adapt to change and uncertainty. I think that's what is happening today.
Great. We have a lot of people asking lots of questions, congratulating. So let me start by bringing some of the other leaders and the community or the audience I wouldn't call it an audience. They're not just an audience. There are people who have an affinity toward Mr. Dupuis and are really eagerly looking forward to his book launch. So I wouldn't call it an audience in a normal parlance. So let's take some questions. We have a question from Prerna Reeves. And this question is for Ken. Mr. Honda, this question is for you. Great to have you, Ken. What does literary success look like to you?
If I could talk about Mr. Dupuis' book too, I think complete leadership on yourself. If you become a leader to lead your life, to make sure that you're happy, just imagine this way. There are like 5 of us, the lazy ones, the smart ones, and not so smart ones, and also very capable ones, and also not capable ones in all of us. So I think the happy person seems to know how to take the leadership of all the 5 or 10 people in you and then pull out the best out of your life. And I think that is how you feel happy about who you are. And it could probably involve financial independence or do what you love. But I think the most important thing is that you take control of your life as a leader. And if you become the best leader and become who you are as a person, but unfortunately, most of us have failed in taking the good leadership. I just want to know how Mr. Dupuis thinks about this. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I really like your analogy, Ken. You're right. And that's the 5 let's say, characteristics of all of us. It's all there, right? I mean,
Yes.
none of us is smarter than all of us together. We know that, right? And by the way, none of us are great at the 5 E's. I think we're naturally good at some of them and not so good, and me as well. And I share that in the book. I won't reveal that secret.
And you know, Paul, I'm interrupting, but one of the questions related to what you're speaking is Prerna Rees asked, congratulations, Paul. How did publishing your first book change your thought process of writing? And while writing the book, were you more original or focused on delivering to readers what they want?
Oh, wow. Great. Another fan. These are great questions. I didn't expect these. Thank you. I think back to Ken's point about, you know, the sort of 5, let's say, faces of who we are, because, you know, there's the voice on this shoulder, and then there's a voice on this shoulder. And there's the voice that tells us we can't do it, and there's the voice that tells us we can. You have a choice as a leader to decide which one to listen to. I always choose to listen to this one. I like the sound of this voice better. The voice that says you can do it, give it a shot, why not, just try, you got nothing to lose. And these are really important mantras for me. To Prerna's question, you know, it's interesting, and I was given advice by authors and by some who have kind of supported me along the way, is to not write for the reader, write for yourself, right? You know, be honest, be authentic. So it's not about, it's certainly not about writing what the reader wants to read. It's more about what I feel needs to be shared, and something that comes deep from within me, and I would say even comes from my heart, because it's honest, and I'm very open in the book about, as I said earlier, successes, failures, discoveries, and so on. So I think it's really important to write for yourself. I promise you one thing, and I was joking with Annurag, we have a book. I can't promise you if it's a great book. I hope you enjoy it. I think I'd let you fill in your own blank on the adjective on the book itself. But I hope you connect with it when you read it, because it really is based on real experience, real observations. And I must say, the 5 E's, the E5, the model, it's been tried, tested, and proven. I've used it for many, many years in various environments, whether it was leading in Japan or Singapore in the business, of course, India in the business environment, but also as a captain of an ice hockey team, also as the chairman of an MPO, a global NPO. And I would say even as a father with two big boys who are, you know, young men navigating their future. So I think this is something that's very practical, and I hope it adds value to the reader.
You know, I want to ask the last question to the author, Mr. Paul Dupuis, and all the 3 panelists, and then I want to bring the community, the audience that has lots of questions, our partners who have made the book launch happen, and who are some way responsible as a catalyst in making it happen. My one question is, and I'll start with Mr. Roopen Roy, is are leaders becoming dwarfer? You know, globally, whether you take leaders of countries, of companies, of communities, are they becoming dwarfer rather than becoming taller? Are we seeing that leadership is headed in the wrong direction?
Well, this question has a political undertone to it, but
Roopen, little louder. Louder.
I think, can you hear me?
Yes, now better. It's better.
Yeah. Basically, I think this question has a political undertone to it, but I will avoid the leadership at a national level.
You know, I'm not just talking of political leadership. I'm just talking of leadership. It's become too much about me, if I may reframe it, rather than about we, about us, about them. It is too much. You know, Ken talked about the, you know, serving your community. You know, leader is a server. Paul talked about it. It's not just, but, you know, it has become too much about me.
See, to be fair to the leaders today, if you look at the CEOs in the IT industry, for example, where I've spent much of my time, they are not very me-focused, because they know that if they don't work with the team, they don't, it's not
the goals that they've set out.
Yes. So therefore, I think if I look at 20 years ago, there were more people who were very egotistic. But now, very large companies which are knowledge-based are having leaders which are knowledgeable and also who are very, working with the team. The teamwork is there. So
a leader is as Paul said, not only leading but following. A leader is also a good follower of good ideas, good suggestions. They can come from it. Ken, your response, are leaders becoming too self-centered, and hence dwarfer and not taller? Do you agree with it or do you disagree with it? Ken? Are leaders becoming dwarfer? You know, they're becoming too individual focused, themselves focused, me. What is your viewpoint on that?
I think you have to make yourself happy. And at the same time, if you can find a way to make everybody happy, you know, good luck with Mr. Dupuis. He has to make 60,000 people happy. I don't know if you can do that, but there has to be a way.
India is 1.3 billion.
That's right. So, you know, I feel so sorry for Indian Prime Minister because, you know, making everybody happy is almost impossible task. But if you have the right vision and get everybody excited, you know, even if what you promised didn't get delivered, still people feel part of it. And I think what we can do is give you yourself the best shot and then see what happens. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah,
Thank you,
absolutely,
Ken, for
Ken.
that
Thank you.
input.
And just on that, and I talk about that in the execute chapter, where actually it's not necessarily about the outcome. It's about how you got to that point. And I think one of the key missions of the game-changing leader, the truly exceptional leader, is to enable those around him or her to shine. Our role is to help people shine. And Ken talks about happiness. There's no happier moment when you shine than when you shine. You know, that moment when I did it, that feeling of accomplishment and the feeling of doing it together with others, falling down, getting back up, getting support, moving forward. You know, that's what a leader does. And my definition of leadership comes out in the book around that. Absolutely, Ken. That's the happiest moment for me is when the leaders around me are having success.
Thank you, Paul. Professor Raghunath, you heard the author, you heard Mr. Roy, you heard Mr. Honda saying, what do you feel about the current style of leadership and what leaders stand for today?
Right. So leadership has always been synonymous of being inspirational. Right. So you call somebody a leader because there is something within you, some part of that dream which is touched. But as Mr. Paul says generally, it's not just inspirational, it is aspirational. That is, you got to raise the bar. And today, if a leader has a role, the leader is just a connector of that value energy which is in the pipeline, which is dislocated everywhere. And therefore, as you rightly said, you know, the stance is different. The stance is that of being a bulwark. Somebody who's a belayer, you know, when you're doing rock climbing, there's a guy below holding the rope and you know, tightening it when he feels you're going to slip. But he's telling you, come on, move ahead. Don't worry about, you know, how tough it is. I think that's what is changing today in terms of an understanding of what a leader is all about.
Thank you, Professor Raghunath. So at this point, Mr. Dupuis, we'll get the last comment about the book from you before we bring in everybody who's involved with the book. What would you say to anybody who's looking to read the book or become a better leader? Anybody who wants to be a better leader, as you said, at home, as a parent, as a company leader, as a community leader, whether you work for an NGO, whether you're a sports person. So what would you say to all the people who want to be better leaders?
Can I read a very small excerpt from the book?
We'd love that.
Sure.
We launched the book at about 12:05.
Okay. Well, then I'll give away one paragraph.
Yes.
All right. Great. I think I've got the one hard copy in the world right here. Yeah. Along with
at this point, let me take some questions. Let me first get Mr. Sachin Chaudhary, who's logged in from Tokyo and again knows Paul well, to ask a question to Paul. Tanvi, can we have Sachin on the video?
Go ahead, Sachin, and I'll read from my book in a moment.
Yes, Sachin.
Hi. Hey, Sachin. Hello.
You'll have to unmute yourself, Sachin.
Okay, hi.
You put it on mute again. Unmute. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
hi everyone. Hi Paul and hi Ken, and congratulations to Paul for making this happen. It's a great start.
Thanks, Sachin. Thank you for your support.
You know, would you like to ask a question about the book and the E5 movement to Paul?
Well, yes, I would like to ask a question to Paul. Like, Paul has been handling like the things in India. India is not that easy because like it's a big population and like, you know, everyone like in the team, like, or in the company, like they feel like they're so correct about a lot of things, like, because in Japan it's different culture, in India it's a different culture, like people are more aggressive and more like, you know, it's a different kind of culture, like, because I've been training Mitsubishi, Accenture, and lot of companies in Japan, and I find a lot of difference in the leadership in Japan and India. So like Paul, he has worked in Japan as well as in India. So I would like to ask Paul, like, how he faced the tough situation in India and how he was able to lead that, like the time or tenure, or like as a position, like as a leader. What was like you faced like the critical issue in India, and like now you feel, oh, it was simple for you, or you were able to like execute things
Got
in
it,
a proper way in India. Yeah.
You got it. Paul.
Thanks, Sachin. First of all, I should say that prior to leaving Japan, leaving Tokyo for India, I had an introduction to India session with Sachin, who's based in Tokyo, and he's an expert on both Japan and India. And it was fascinating stuff. And Sachin, I still use the lessons that you taught me back in Tokyo. Now,
Great.
yeah, absolutely. If you look at the world, and I would say the world that I operate in my company, we have 39 countries. I would argue that Japan is at one end and India is at the other, and every other country is somewhere in between when it comes to everything from demographics to culture to business practices and so on, right? So, and yeah, going from Japan, which I knew very well after 25 years and speaking Japanese and leading in Japan, coming to India, I was an absolute alien. I mean, it was a completely foreign territory. And of course, it was a repeat of 1990, because when I arrived here in 2017, I didn't know anybody in India either. So it was literally a brand new start. But on top of that, I was tasked with leading a very large, complex organization in India. So it's been quite a journey the past few years, and we've come a long way. The measurable outcomes have been amazing, game-changing. But I look below that, the culture that we've built, the leadership team that we've built, the future that we've laid the foundation for is absolutely incredible. And when you ask how, Sachin, I think it started with the advice you gave me. 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen first, right? I think it's very important when you take on a new challenge to listen. And leaders, and I talk about this in the book, we tend to, the old-fashioned form of leadership is that the leader should know. The leader should have the answer. You would go to your leader to get the answer. But those days are gone. We all have instant access to any information that we want. With a couple clicks, we can get it. So it's less now about leader as the one who knows, and it's more about the leader who enables. And that's why the 4th E is so important now. It's a new generation of leadership. And so I was constantly on the search, trying to understand how I, as a Canadian guy coming from Japan into India, which I knew nothing about, how could I enable my leaders and my teams here in India to be successful, to shine? And that was my main focus, Sachin. But I spent a good 2 months traveling the 4 corners of India. You name the town, I've probably been there. And then I started to kind of see the opportunity to enable.
Thank you. There are lots of questions, about 22 questions all put together,
Wow.
but I'll take some. I'll first get, can we get Mr. Amit Yadav? I don't know him, but he's asked the excellent question. If we have Mr. Amit Yadav, we can get him on screen, he can ask it. Or if we don't have him, I can ask it. Tanvi, do we have Mr. Amit Yadav?
Yes, he's here. Amit sir, please unmute
Go ahead,
yourself.
Mr.
And
Yadav,
ask
go
a
ahead,
question.
ask your question.
Yeah. Thank you, Anurag, for giving me this opportunity.
Your question
And
is
it was an inspiring discussion, and I was really motivated to hear the journey which Mr. Paul just narrated. So my question to you, Mr. Paul, is what's your leadership style? And you just mentioned that you have a team where you lead 60,000 people. So from that height, how do you ensure a successful execution? Because 5th E is about execute. So being at that high, at that top level, how do you ensure that the execution is smooth and flawless is my question.
Thank you. Great question. Thank you, Amit. Very challenging, very challenging. I talk about this in the book, in fact, where anyone who's done an MBA would have studied this theory that the strategic leader, to be strategic means you have to be up at 30,000 feet. And that seems to be the magic number, 30,000 feet. Well, I can tell you, if I'm at 30,000 feet, I have no idea what's going on the ground. That means I become a leader out of touch. And so what I look at leadership as being both in the game. So in the game, on the ground, let's say in the mud, in the battle with the team, side by side, shoulder to shoulder, as well as climbing up a ladder. And I would say maybe up to 100 feet, because I can still see and feel what's happening on the ground with my team. And it's about knowing when to go up to 100 feet and when to go down. And if you were to look at my average day, we talk about leadership style, I'm up and down that ladder several times a day. So it's very important for a leader to be in the game, to have credibility, because this leader walks the talk, but it's also important to climb up and see the landscape, to look at the strengths, the opportunities, the threats, and so on, and to come back down and bring that intelligence to the team. So again, in the book, I talk about a tactic, a technique, let's say, that I use, something called pulse checks. And these are sessions where we really get a sense of how people are doing and how they're feeling, of course, and how they're taking action to move towards a North Star. But it's a constant movement between being tactical and being strategic, but always, always, always staying in touch and having your finger on the pulse.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
We have lots of questions, and I'll ask some questions to Professor Raghunath, Mr. Honda, and Mr. Roy. But there are lots of interesting questions coming. There is Nafisa, if I've got her name right. She wants to ask a question.
It's a he. It's Mr. Nafi S.
Nafi S. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Nafi S. Nafi S. works with Mr. Dupuis at Randstad. Mr. Nafi S., go ahead, ask your question.
Hey, thanks, Annurag.
Nafis.
You were earlier right. My name is pronounced as Nafis. So thank you so much for giving me.
Nafis means special. Nafis ka matlab hota hai special.
Means genuine.
Genuine,
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
my father uses that.
Paul, thank you so much, and congratulations for your book. It's finally launching, and we are all very excited at Randstad. I can see all the WhatsApp group buzzing. So my question to you is, Paul, out of all these 5 E's, which one is your favorite? Which E is your favorite one?
Thanks, Nafis. And yeah, Nafis is doing a fine job in the West for us here in India. He's also been with me, by the way, to Ladakh, to the top of the world, where I do some volunteering and support the Indian national ice hockey team and donate equipment. So Nafis has been on some journeys himself. Yeah, all of the E's, if you were to ask me honestly, I would talk about the opposite first. The one that I found I was the weakest at, which coming to India has helped me become stronger, is enable. Because I came from the ground, like many of us leaders who have grown up from, say, the front line, from the desk as an individual contributor and grown up through, sweat and tears and hard work. I always felt that enabling should happen yourself. But I've actually become more mature, I think, as a leader, thanks to India. I realized the opportunity to enable is massive. And so that's one that I've really been working on, becoming a leader as an enabler. And I say the stage in my journey as a leader, that's where I'm at right now. I'm focusing heavily on that one. What do I like? I really like the express part. The envision part was also challenging for me. I needed lots of advice. And I asked people for advice when I was creating the vision, because I needed to know, especially in the Indian context, what would really touch the hearts and minds. Because often the leader believes that this is a compelling vision, but when you take it out to the floor, there's no reaction. And so I really enjoy, as you know, Nafis, I really enjoy being with people, sharing the vision, whether it's through town halls, one-on-ones, whatever it is. I really enjoy the express part, because I think that's the moment of opportunity where you can really ignite that movement.
Thank you, Paul. Even the book is an expression, right? Even the book is an expression. I also want to bring in first the CEO of LID Publishing in India is the country manager, and BW Books and LID has published it together. And there are lots of questions to panelists also. I want to bring my friend Sukanta Day, who's been in leadership jobs. Mr. Day, any question to Paul or participants? And thank you for our collaboration and making this happen and being an integral part of it. So any comment, question, Mr. Day?
Yeah, Paul, congratulations. Excellent book, which I had the liberty of reading right at the early stages. My question to you, Paul, is that what leadership advice you have for the youth of India? Because right now the youth is very confused given the post-COVID times. And if you look at the world, it is the youth which has changed the world in the last 20 years. If you look at companies like Google, Facebook, WhatsApp, etc., they really, 20 years back, they were not there. And there were very young people who changed the whole face of the tech space. So the management of change has been very rapid in the last 20 years, and after COVID, it'll be
leadership lessons
even
for
higher.
millennials, and especially for a lot of times, this is the first crisis in their life, whether it's my children. And I'll ask Ken and Professor Raghunath and Mr. Roy also to respond to this. But we'll start with you, Mr. Dupuis. Very good question, Sukanta.
And thank you, Sukanta, and thank you for your support as well on this journey. Here we are today. So that's an absolutely fantastic question and timely. Let me also go back to my definition of leadership. When you look up leadership in the dictionary, it often insinuates that we're talking about leading people, leading a group of people. Leadership actually can be one. In fact, we all have leadership inside of us. Leadership is what you stand for. It's walking the talk in your beliefs. It's being courageous. What I would suggest and recommend to young people nowadays is take control. Leadership is about taking control. It's grabbing the wheel. It's also about taking risks. When I say risks, stepping out of your comfort zone. You have nothing to lose by stepping out of your comfort zone. You have everything to gain. And that's spoken by somebody who's done it a bunch of times. When I was 22 and now when I'm 52, I did it again when I came to India. And I will continue to do it. Embrace the opportunity to step out of your comfort zone. If you really want to be fully alive and develop leadership, step out of your comfort zone. The next one is raise your hand. When you get an opportunity to take a leadership role, whether it's a small project or whether it's to be a volunteer in your community, when you see an opportunity to do something, to step up, to take the lead, go for it. Absolutely go for it. Because what happens is you start to build the leadership muscle. And it might not work out exactly as you expected, but that's okay. So I would say raise your hand, take that leap, step out of your comfort zone. And finally, the next one is surround yourself with people who are ambitious and eager and are also taking risks, stepping out of their comfort zone, raising their hands, trying to create a better world. When you surround yourself with like-minded people, you create your own movement.
Thank you. Mr. Honda, we'd like your comment on what can millennials do to face this unprecedented time. What is your advice to millennials?
Thank you. I was just listening to Mr. Dupuis so much, so I kind of forgot I was next. So I think you said it so beautifully. To me, what's happening is a global opportunity to be able to shift all of our lives, because I think 400 years since the start of this company in 1602, I think it's the start of capitalism. We've pursued money for the past 400 years. And now I think we're going to shift in a new way that we're going to follow our heart and feel for one another. So for young people, I think just recognize that the world has shifted. You're going to see it obviously more in the next few months. So what was true 2 months ago, 3 months ago is not true anymore. So we are going to create our own rules. And right now it's a little chaotic, but I think we are going to come up with ideas, what's possible for the new world. And I think India will be one of the leaders in the world. And so I hope India will take, especially young people, I think when young Indian people will be mature in 20 years, I think you will be leading the world. So I have great hopes for Indian young people to take the leadership, because what you decide will decide the fate of the planet.
Professor Raghunath, your advice to millennials. I know you teach millennials at IIM Bangalore, apart from consulting. Your advice. You'll have to unmute yourself, Professor Raghunath.
Thank you for reminding. So once again, I'm reminded of what Mr. Paul generally says. So he calls this millennial generation as no sentence, no paragraph generation. These are guys who believe in short text. These are guys
or emojis, not even in text. Emojis, yes.
Exactly. So they are always asking the question, how can I make an impact? And if I can't make an impact, to hell with everything else. So I think the wonderful thing about what's going to happen, and I'm telling you, whatever is the COVID problem, these guys are going to remake and unmake all that is rubbish and irrelevant and excessive. They're going to bring this sanity back into this world, and I'm very, very confident they will do that. The only thing I think which is a big takeaway for them, and especially I would recommend them to read the book, is because this book tells them how it is to translate individual to a collective responsibility. How is it to translate individual ambition into a collective ambition? And I'm sure this book for them will read like a novel. It is so racy in style. It is so very engaging that I can bet a bottom dollar for any millennial who goes and gets a book right now, downloads it, because they would like to download it on their phone.
And dare I say, build on, books can change your life. Whatever little I've achieved in a very serious way, because I read very early, I read a lot, not as much as I'd like to, but books can be guides, they can be your companions, they can be your, so to say, coach, if I may use that word. Mr. Roy, you heard Professor Raghunath, you heard Mr. Honda. What is your advice to millennials?
You see, I think I take more advice from millennials. I work very
reverse
closely
mentoring. You're talking of reverse mentoring.
Yeah. You watched that movie called The Intern. That's all that is about. And I work very closely with IIM Calcutta's Innovation Park, which has got a large number of startups. See, they are in the midst of disruption and innovation and completely out of the box thinking. But at the same time, they will read Paul's book because in their own way, they will understand how leadership principles can be applied to a disrupted, new, innovative business model. They will learn it, they will adapt it themselves. So
thank you. At this point, I also want to bring in another collaborative partner, Mr. Gautam Nandani of Right Selection, who has again been part of this initiative and who always encourages and positive, and he believes in authors and books. He's going to be an author himself a little later, but today it's about Mr. Dupuis' book. Gautam, your question and comment.
Thank you very much, Annurag. Congratulations, Paul. It's been a pleasure to be part of your journey, and starting off with your endorsement with Marshall Goldsmith a couple of weeks back as well. Pleasure to meet all of you. My question to you, Paul, is you're a Canadian. You spent many years in Asia. You spent some time in Dubai, in the Gulf region, and now living in India the last recent years. What are the cultural learning experiences that you can share that have helped you become now what I regard as a global leader?
Thanks. And Gautam, thank you for all your support. And really looking forward to your book coming up soon as well. And
thank you.
Celebrating that moment. Well, first of all, and that's a really good question. You know what's interesting? I get asked this question a lot in Japan and also in India by media and also even by colleagues and so on. What's the difference between leading in country A and country B? What's the difference between leading in Japan and leading in India and so on? What I've discovered through my journey, and I talk about this in the book, actually, the more you have experiences across cultures and across borders, you start to realize that leadership is universal, it's borderless. And what we discover also is that people at their essence, at the core, want to be with a leader and follow a leader who is human. And so there are certain rules that are universal. If I go to Japan and I ask Ken and others, would Japanese people follow a leader who is honest? They'll probably say yes. Huh? If I come to India and ask Annurag, will Indian people follow a leader who is honest? Probably going to hear yes, right? So there are certain things, and I can list up 20 questions like that the answer will be universally yes. So what I've discovered in the E5 model is all about that. It's less about the cultural nuances, and it's more about what is universal. So I'm on a mission to prove that effective, exceptional, game-changing leadership is in fact universal, and it's beyond culture.
Thank you so much. I think there are lots of 20 questions, there's one question from Hideki Matsubara, if I have got the pronunciation.
Yeah, Matsubara-san. Yeah.
Matsubara-san.
Yeah.
My question is, what is the importance of E5 leader contributing to the society? How does a leader contribute to the society? And we'll take it to the author and
sure.
the three panelists.
Well, these are really nice surprises. Thank you. Matsubara-san was actually the gentleman who introduced me to Ken the very beginning, several years ago, Ken. It was Matsubara-san who introduced us, calling in from Tokyo. Thank you. What a nice surprise. Sorry, Annurag, repeat the question. I missed it. I was so excited.
How do leaders contribute to society?
Well, actually, and I talk about also this in my book. I believe leadership is not a title. Leadership is a way of living. And so it's actually about behavior. Therefore, exceptional leadership is about exceptional behavior. Where does behavior come from? Values. A leader has the opportunity to make a massive impact on the world. And so one of my guiding principles, I'll call it a mantra, which I've lived with for many, many years, and I thank my father for teaching me this, is to do well and do good. So a full life is not only about doing well, making money, getting that promotion, getting that better car, or whatever the materialistic be. That's not enough. That's hollow. We have to aim to do well as do good. And do good means do good for the world in some way, shape, or form. Leaders are in a very unique position to impact change, to help others through the multiplier effect, to help others do well and do good. So I think leaders have an amazing opportunity to change the world.
Fantastic. At this point, I think we've reached the time. There are more questions, and we will funnel those to Mr. Dupuis and all the panelists. I think it's time for the launch of the E5 moment, and then we'll get Mr. Dupuis to read a chapter or a paragraph from the book, and we can formally launch the cover and the book if we can. So this is the E5 moment. It has a forward from Marshall Goldsmith. Couldn't have been a better person than Marshall to write that. Leadership to the rule of five. By the way, there is a rule that if you have more than five, people don't remember. It's difficult to remember beyond five. So the E5 moment, that's a lovely cover. It's a very sobering color, and congratulations, Mr. Dupuis. The cover is out. We'd like you to. The book is available on Amazon and all platforms. You can download the book. We can also share the link. And if you can also bring the table of contents again back on the screen so that the viewers can see the table of contents. Chetan and Tanvi. So the first chapter is My Accidental Encounter with Leadership. Chapter 2 is Learning to Lead, Leadership in You. Then is Envision, Express, Excite, Enable, Execute, and Leadership in the Future of Work. And then it says, now it's your turn. So the E5 moment is about creating more leaders. It is not just about telling your story, but E5 moment's core is to create more leaders. Paul, at this point, we'd request you to read that favorite paragraph that you wanted to read.
Sure, thank you. Well, this is from the introduction of my book, and thank you so much, Annurag. I'm just going to read a brief passage from the introduction. There's a wonderful sense of exhilaration in working together with teams to achieve a common goal. This feeling of fulfillment is a high, and for many leaders, it's the main thing that gets them out of bed every morning. That's true for me. Here's the good news. Any one of us can be a leader, and even better, any one of us can be a game-changing leader. Leadership is learned. It's built through experience. It's born in opportunities to influence others, whether it's on the playground, in your home, or in the boardroom. And the best part is that leadership doesn't require a title. Becoming an exceptional leader takes effort, focus, commitment, a strong sense of self-awareness, and plenty of humility. Leadership is defined by behavior. Exceptional leadership, then, requires exceptional behavior.
Thank you, Paul, and a formal congratulations. We have lots of questions. I possibly cannot take all the questions I would have liked to. We're already about 12 minutes above time. But I'd like to close by taking closing comments from Mr. Honda, from Professor Raghunath, from Mr. Roy, and finally from the author, and close the session. Lots of congratulations pouring in. Mr. Honda, your final comments on leadership and your final message for Mr. Dupuis and his book, The E5 Moment.
Thank you, all the panelists and Businessworld and all the people.
You can call me AB. AB is easy. AB.
Okay, yes. And also all the viewers. And once again, congratulations on Mr. Dupuis' beautiful work. E5 movement has just begun, right? So I'm so excited that this leadership, that this book comes out of India and originally comes from Canada, which is a peaceful country. So I'm so happy to be able to witness the start of this E5 movement happening in India, which I think it's going to be the leader of the world in 10 years. So congratulations, and Indian people, I have once again huge respect for your country, and I feel the happiest to be part of the beautiful panel discussion. Thank you all.
Raghunath.
Namaste.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you. Thank you so much for being part. Professor Raghunath, your final comments? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you once again. Mr. Annurag Batra, wonderfully run discussion on a very exciting book. But I cannot stop myself from seeking permission from Mr. Paul to read a few lines, which was just taken me in. You know, this is his narrative about the 1980 ice hockey Olympics. And there are these 22-year-old guys forming the American team, the US team. They are facing up to the Russians who have won the trophy 5 years counting. And their coach says this to them, and I want to read this because I'll tell you, it's wonderful. It says, Mr. Paul, I have a permission to do that?
Of course, go ahead. It's a great story. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the match is about to start, and this is what he tells these 22-year-olds. Great moments are born from great opportunity. And that's what you have here tonight, boys. That's what you have earned here tonight, one game. If you played them 10 times, they might win 9 of them. But not this game, not tonight. Tonight, we skate with them. Tonight, we stay with them. And we shut them down because we can. And they won the damn game. And they beat the Finns, because the Finns too were in the finals. And they won the World Trophy. What a paragraph. And I must tell you, it's just an inspiring book. You can start anywhere, especially the younger folks. And that'll make your day. Congratulations, Mr. Paul.
Thank you, Professor Raghunath. And
thank you so
finally,
much.
to you, Mr. Roy.
Thank you. I first must thank Paul and congratulate him for this excellent book that he has launched today. Annurag, you've been a great moderator. Ken, nice to meet you. I have also lived and worked in Japan, so I have a great fondness for that country. Professor Raghunath, thank you for your kind comments. And I think leadership will always be important, because without human talent is what makes the difference. And unless you are able to inspire, you will not be able to leverage the creativity of young people. So therefore, this book is going to be very important, because leadership is at the core of management activity and business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. Finally, the word from the author. Congratulations to Dupuis. We wish you luck in being a best-selling author, and more importantly, making an impact. Even if one person becomes a leader and a better leader, I think you've done your job. Forget 5,000 or 10,000, as Mr. Honda said. But even if one person's life changes because of this book, and I'm sure it'll be more than one person. So congratulations, and your final comments.
Thank you, Annurag, and thank you to everyone who joined us today and for your kind comments. And you summed it up very well, Annurag. If one person reads this book and gets inspired to become a better leader, to do well and to do good, then I think I've accomplished my mission in writing the book. But I would think in a country like India, we're probably gonna reach more than one person. So that's great news. And I agree with Ken. The future of the world is connected to the future of India. Absolutely. You know, one of the things that I really believe in is that as leaders, we didn't get from there to here alone. Many people have helped us through our journey in life. And I have so many people to thank, and I'll do that in the coming days, of course, but so many people have inspired me, encouraged me, supported me along the journey. And I do believe in this notion of standing on the shoulders of giants. You know, you learn from those who have gone before you. And that's also a very important part of Japanese culture. The senpai, the people who have walked before you and lived before you, can learn so much. And I appreciate all of those who have advised me along the way. I hope people like the book. I hope it gets something from the book. I hope you find some golden nuggets in here that you can close that book, stand up and use right away. And if that happens, then I'll also feel happy that I've written this book. So I want to thank you again, everyone, for supporting me again, for joining us today. This is an amazing moment. I never imagined that one day, one, I would be in India, and two, I would write a book and release it in India as well. So an amazing moment in my life. So thank you for being part of it.
Congratulations. At this point, we'd like to say goodbye to all our viewers. We'd encourage you to download the E5 Moment, buy it on Amazon, read it. Hopefully, it will impact your life and make you a better leader. Here is the cover of the book, The E5 Moment, Leadership Through the Rule of Five by Paul Dupuis. It comes from a practitioner who has really put in the book what he has done. It's not just, he's not being preachy, he's actually acted on what he is put in the book. So hopefully you will be able to implement what the E5 Moment stands for. Thank you to Mr. Honda, thank you to Mr. Roy, thank you to Mr. Raghunath, Professor Raghunath, and thank you to Mr. Paul Dupuis and the Businessworld books team and the LID team. And thank you to all our partners for supporting this. We wish you luck, and we hope that you become a better leader by just controlling yourself. If you can control yourself, if you can be disciplined yourself, I think you'll be a better leader. That's what I'd like to say. It's a battle. It's like the game of golf. The only person that you compete with is yourself. So if you are able to control your impulses, if you're balanced, if you're able to believe in less is more, and you straight to your purpose, the end vision that the E5 Moment talks about, you'll be a better leader. Thank you. God bless you. And hopefully there'll be many more book reading sessions of the E5 Moment and interactions with the author of the E5 Moment. And today we've had the global launch. We'll have an India launch. We'll have a Japan launch. So we will have a launch of all the countries that Mr. Dupuis has worked in. And we look forward to unveiling the chapters of the book in that. Thank you so much. God bless you. Good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.